Have you ever wondered how other photographers manage to capture high contrast, black and white, architectural, fine art photos like this? Or like this? Well, sit back, load up Photoshop, because I'm about to show you. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you a step-by-step process from converting your raw image into a black and white, loading it up into Photoshop, then separating the different elements in the actual photo, a bit of masking here and there, and then finally going from a photo like this to this. So I just want to give a special shout out to Artlist, whose services I've been using now for pretty much well over a year actually, I think. And while they're not sponsoring this video, they were kind enough to give me an affiliate link. If you wanted to test out Artlist for 2 months, absolutely free, you can do so by just using the link in the description below. And you can cancel anytime if you feel like it's not a great fit for you. Anyway, back to the video. Before we head into Photoshop, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the image we're about to edit. I had a short visit to London the other day, and I took this image just while walking around, really just exploring the city. Just had my Canon R5C on me and fitted with the Canon EF 135mm f2 L series lens, and thought I'd take a quick snap of the shard. While this photo is not exactly how I would have liked it to have been, the editing process doesn't really change. You can go and improve on this by actually using something like a tripod, a neutral density filter, or a polarizer filter, just to enhance the contrast as well as darkening the skies even more. Although in this specific tutorial I did actually remove the sky. You'll see shortly how I've done it, and just added a gradient to it instead. I would have actually preferred to have used a tripod with a slow shutter speed to introduce some motion blur of the clouds above. Unfortunately, it was a fully overcast day, so it didn't really give me that opportunity. I also didn't have my tripod with me. So yeah, let's head into it now, and let's see how we can create a high contrast black and white fine art architectural photograph. Okay, so to get started, I actually took several images of the shard. As you can see in Camera Raw, I've got all the images loaded up here, all sort of separate. I just panned the camera up. This is all handheld, so it's not perfect, but luckily Photoshop managed to merge all these together as a panorama. I'm going up all the way, and then finally, when merged, I've got the final image here. Now, as you can see, it's a very bland, low contrast looking scene. It's cool and all that. I try to go for a bit of a simplistic look, but just looking at the image straight away, you can see, okay, there's a couple of things here to note. So you've got complex selections coming all the way from the left all the way to the right on this crane itself as well. Now, whether you choose to keep the crane in or take it out, that's completely up to you. See, okay, you're going to have to mask out these little bits here as well, all the way through. Windows like that can be problematic as well. Obviously, if you're adding a darkened sky in the background, you're going to have these little bits sticking out here. These little highlights of the original sky coming through the windows. So you're going to have to manually remove those as well. Image took about an hour to process, to mask out everything, just using the pen tool, which we'll go into now, and then creating a mask essentially around the sky area. So looking at the final merged image, I'm going to just add a black and white conversion to it. I tend to go in here, which is your profiles, and scroll down to black and white. I think for this particular image, I actually opted for the green filter, just because it adds a little bit of punch, not too much, but it was a good midway between the blue and the green. So I like the green a bit more. Totally down to your own preference, of course. Once you're done there, head back. All I did then was to add some global adjustments, so adjustments that affect the entire image. I added a little bit of contrast, push those highlights up a little bit more, keep an eye on your histogram, and always be sure to add the shadow clipping warning and the highlight clipping warning as well, so that way if you do go over like that, you'll see the highlight clip warning starts to show itself, so that way you know that's completely blown out. Likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, if you go too dark, you're going to see the blue clip markings come in, and that way you know it's underexposed and it's completely black. There's no detail in the shadows, same as the highlights when it clips. Anyway, let's reset that. So I've pushed the highlights a little bit there. I've just pushed the shadows slightly, bring the whites up a little bit more, keep an eye on the histogram as well, and then I've brought down my blacks just slightly, so just to about above where it clips, right there. Added a little bit of texture to it, clarity, and a slight bit of dehazing. Come on, why? Sometimes takes a little second to respond. There we go. And apologies if you do hear a fan in the background. That is just my computer going absolutely haywire because of the processing of this image. So I do apologize for any fan noise that you're hearing. Anyway, back to the image. I'm going to zoom in a little bit as I shot this at ISO 320. So I do want to just remove a little bit of the noise here. So I'm going to go over to the luminance tab under detail and just go just about 25, 26. That just removes the worst of the grain and the noise essentially, so it creates a bit of a smoother look to it, which I quite like. And once that's done, I'm going to just hold shift and say open as an object, because I want to keep the original raw file as a smart object, so I can always double click on the layer and go back into it again. That way I've got full control of the image. If I do want to adjust any of the raw settings again, I can just double click on the layer and do so. Right, so now that we've got our image opened up in Photoshop, I'm going to just crop it quickly. I do feel like there's a lot of information here at the bottom that is a bit irrelevant. I'm not a big fan of the truck moving across the bridge there, so I'm going to crop this as a 5:7, and I'm just going to move it up slightly to about there. I think the original image was relatively similar to that. I'm going to show you the beginning on how to use the pen tool for selections, after which I'll show you the final version once the selections have been done and I've applied the mask to it as well. We'll speed through this. You don't have to sit through the whole tedious process of me doing the masking, but you'll get the idea. Right, so I'm going to select my pen tool by pressing P. Right, so with the pen tool selected, I'm just going to press caps lock because that changes the cursor to a little crosshair instead of that. Just prefer it that way. I'm going to create my first point outside of the image and my next point at the start of it. Now, notice where I'm placing that next point. It's not exactly on the edge of the building. I always prefer to do it a little bit more inside of the building itself. So there. This is important for when we've made our selection at the end. We can essentially feather that selection slightly just to soften those edges up a little bit, because otherwise it'll be completely harsh and it'll look completely unnatural as well. Right, so I'm going to start up, create another point there, and I'm going to create a point there. Holding in control, you can select points and you can move them around as well as you see fit. My next point will be just over there, so I'm just going to move that up. I'm going to actually lose this bit of roof here. It just doesn't appeal to me. So I'm just going to make a straight selection down like that, all the way across, go back up. So I'm just doing this for speed, so you get the idea. So obviously when you're doing this for a final project, or something that you want to sell, be a bit more meticulous in your selections. Now with this, I'm going to use the pen tool again, but I'm going to click, hold and drag, so it creates these two little anchors on either side of the point. That way we can adjust the angle slightly so it bends the actual line across. Create another point over there, just move it across a little bit. Oh, that's all right. Another one over there like that. and we'll just carry on this way. Now I'll skip ahead so you can get the final selection. You get the idea of what I'm doing. So it's essentially just this, and I'll be selecting the edge all the way throughout. I've made my selection now. I actually, in the end, opted to lose the crane. I just thought it's distracting. It takes away too much of the image. This approach is a lot more minimalist, and we really just want to retain focus on the shard itself and not get distracted by objects surrounding it. I've done my selection here. You can see the mask as well. If I alt click on the mask, you can see that is my mask right there, just using the pen tool. If I go over to my paths palette over there, you can see there is my pen tool selection, and if I scroll around, you can see I've just done it on the outside like that all the way around, and I've used the pen tool. Once I've made my main selection on the outside of the building, I've gone ahead and then created another selection for each of these individual spaces inside of the building as well. So wherever the background shines out through the windows, I've gone and removed that as well. Once you've done your pen tool selection, you would then go and control click on the paths selection there in your paths palette, and then you've got your marching ants. Then all you simply would do is just to go over to your mask tool and just create mask. So if I delete that mask now, I can simply go back to my paths palette, control click or command click on a Mac, and I've got my marching ants back here. And all I'll do is simply go back to my layers palette and just create a mask. Easy as that. Although now you'll see we've got quite harsh edges around the selection of the building itself. So this is where that feathering comes into play. So I'm going to delete that layer mask. I'm going to go back to my paths palette, and I'm going to control click on that. I'm then going to select or press M on my keyboard to select the marquee tool, right click on the image, and over here just select feather. Now 5 pixels is way too much. I'll probably select something like 0.5, and that just feathers the selection slightly. Go back to my layers palette and then create that mask again, and now you can see the edges are a lot softer. It appears a little bit more realistic that way. Great, so now we've got our image masked. We can now proceed to add the background. For this, I'm just going to create a new layer, drop it down below my main image, right at the bottom. I'm just going to name this as a black, caps lock is engaged, black background, and I'm going to press shift backspace, and I'm going to create a black fill, and that's already looking great. So we're halfway there. Now we can also have a look at our selection again. Just make sure all the bits are out that we need to select. It's all looking all right. I can probably go in and select these little bits here. That's still part of the old background shining through, so I can probably go out and mask those out. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I just want to show you the basic process of it, so you can go ahead and recreate this yourself. So what I'll do next is I'm going to create a gradient. So I'm going to head over to my gradient tool over here. Make sure it's set to a circular gradient like that. Make sure it's white and black. And I'm just going to click and drag that out. That's going to create a new gradient fill over there. We're going to select that layer and drop it into the back. Move this down slightly. Now we can change the size of our gradient as well and the shape of it. So we can make it a bit more, spherical, a bit more oval, whichever way you prefer. I'm just going to stick to that. And then you can also choose how soft this gradient is, whether it's a harsh gradient or a lot softer. Now I really just wanted to be a subtle glow in the background behind the building, so I'm just going to opt for something like that. There we go. Now one thing to notice is that when creating this gradient, you've got these edges. I don't know if you're going to see this on YouTube because of the compression, but we've got a bit of banding going on here, and we want to get rid of that. Now the simplest solution to that is to add noise to it. Naturally, anything in a photograph has noise because it's produced by a camera sensor, and camera sensors have noise. But for something like this that you add in Photoshop later on, it doesn't have noise. It's therefore not going to look like it fits in. It's going to look pasted in. So we need to add that additional bit of noise to it. Now make sure your gradient fill layer is selected. We're going to go up here to filter. We're going to go to noise, add noise, and we're going to rasterize that. So I'm going to add a little bit of noise, just very slightly, maybe not 0.2, but let's do 0.5. Make sure it's set to Gaussian and monochromatic is enabled. Now we can see we've added a little bit of noise here already, although it's not quite matching the camera. So all I'm going to do is press Ctrl Alt F or Command Alt F, I think, on a Mac. I might be wrong. So I'm just going to do that a couple of times and add a bit more noise in there. Now, yes, it is too much, but now we're going to go to blur, Gaussian blur. We're going to add 0.5 pixels and press OK. Now that's just softened the noise, so it's blurred the noise a little bit. We're going to go back to filter again, add noise, 0.5, and add just a little bit of noise back in again. And that should give you an interesting texture in the sky. So it looks a bit more natural. It doesn't look synthetic. It just seems to match a little bit better overall. For all intents and purposes, this image is done. But you can go a step further and do a bit of dodging and burning if you'd like to. For this exercise, I'm going to do just some basic dodging and burning. We just want to emphasize the shape of the shard and maybe bring out some details and also remove some details from objects surrounding the building that we may find distracting. In order to do this, I'm going to create a new curves adjustment layer. I'm going to just do my selection, so just bring down the overall sort of brightness of the image, and press Ctrl I to invert the mask on it so it's no longer visible. I'm going to then press B on my keyboard and select a general dry brush or general brush, soft round brush, and I'm going to just check that my color on the left here is selected to white. Maybe make this slightly smaller, and then my opacity, maybe make it about 40, and my flow about 40 as well. And then I'm just going to gently brush in. Oh, one thing I forgot to do is on your curves palette down here, you just want to click on that, and that anchors it to the layer below. So it only, whatever changes you make to the curves layer only affects that layer it's anchored to. Now I'm going to brush in a little bit of black on the side of the building here, just where there's a bit of shadow. You can see that change already taking shape. A little bit at the top there. A little bit down there. And a little bit down there as well. So we're essentially just sculpting and shaping the light around the building to make it more impactful, brings more emphasis to the overall shape of the building, the lighting and all that. Switch this layer off, you're going to be able to see that's the original and that is what we've done to it. You can always decrease the opacity of the layer itself, so it just brings it back a little bit. Something like that. Do before and after. Yeah, that should be good. And you can create another curves adjustment layer. This time we can brighten it. Again, Control I to invert, and we can now go on to the highlights and brush in, oh, anchor that, brush in the highlights if we wanted to. Add a bit of detail down there. So yeah, that's essentially it. Bring down the opacity of that slightly, and there we go. That is essentially all you need to do. You can now go ahead and do whatever else you want to do to it. You can maybe add a little cloud in there or do a full sky replacement if you've got a suitable sky that you want to pop in there. Right, so I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching my video. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit that like button while you're at it. I'd really appreciate the support. It helps me out and helps me to create more content like this. Hope you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next one.